everybody. Hope you found some really good lunch wherever you went. And there's lots of more chocolate biscuits. So we have two more presentations today. It's quite nice, we're quite relaxed for time and so on, but we've been sticking very well to the time. Well done, everybody. So it's a great pleasure to welcome one of the TSF stalwarts, John Baxter, who is well known to many of you for his amazing website focused on the music hall, which I think many of us consult quite regularly. And John's doing a lot of work in the background, and it continues. But today, probably based on a lot of that, he's going to talk about Harry Lauder and Harry Clifton. So over to you, John. Thank you very much.
Yes, it says here, I'm John Baxter, a retired academic, so it's good that I wrote it in my notes page to remember. I'm retired now. I used to run the Open degree at the Open University. So hello. I'm just saying, when I was an academic, I ran the Open degree at the Open University, so I could bawl for England about the difference between interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary studies, but I'll try and resist the temptation. Okay, so moving swiftly on. As has been said, my hobby or my penance for something is to create this open source notebook, which is changing and being updated all the time as more information becomes available on the links between music hall and folk music. And it's very much a sub-project of Steve's ROUD indexes, really. I rely a lot on the work that Steve has already done, but I also spend a lot of time corresponding with Steve about wrinkles that exist within it, and I wouldn't dare say inaccuracies, but inaccuracies. I have to say at the beginning that when I find the original or correct versions of what's been thought of as a traditional song, that doesn't mean to think I'm finding the right version, or that I sit there and sing around saying, you sang that one wrong, it should be water, not waiter, which is tempting, but I don't do that very often. But I should also say that sometimes finding the original version means that you find a lost verse, or you find a way of singing it, which to my feeling is sometimes better than what's come through the folk process. So I wouldn't say the folk process is infallible. But Harry Clifton and Harry Lauder conveniently have the same first name. They were both key singer-songwriters in the music halls. Harry Clifton, possibly not really remembered today, Harry Lauder still within living memory. So I'll briefly go through some facts about the first Harry. He was the son of a carpenter. Like many music hall stars, he came from the working class. By the end of his life, he was a bit of a superstar, touring the islands of Britain with his own concert party. He was credited with writing almost all his own songs, though quite often the music has been written by others or drawn from other sources, but that isn't officially, very often officially credited. He worked with his publishers, music publishers, sheet music publishers, Hotwood and Crew, and they sold tens of thousands, possibly even millions, of his sheet music. Certainly, he was right up there with in selling sheet music. He was very much at the respectable end of the market. His songs could be sung in middle-class parlours as well as in music halls. He also wrote many comic songs, often involving the character of an aspiring white-collar working man suffering at the hands of smart, aspiring women, and you'll hear that if you listen in detail to some of the material. So I've come up with that's the long list of songs that he wrote that we can find within the tradition. There is another one, soon to be confirmed, which is been collected by Alfred Williams, called I'll List in the Wars, I'll Die, but I haven't quite finished work on that one yet. But that was really there for anyone who downloads the PowerPoint presentation in advance, so they've got it. Here are some key songs, and I'll read them out in case anybody finds it difficult to read in the recorded version. Polly Perkins of Paddington Green, Pulling Hard Against the Stream, which is a song I'll talk about later. On Board the Kangaroo, The Magnificent Paddle Your Own Canoe. It's called Paddle Your Own Canoe, not The Magnificent Paddle Your Own Canoe. My Bonny Lies Over the Ocean, which was originally My Barney Lies Over the Ocean, the Clifton song. The Dark Girl Dressed in Blue, I'll Go in This for Sailor, and a song that's more popular in the revival than in the early 20th century, The Calico Printer's Clerk. Terrible. Okay, so what you're going to hear now, my new favourite toy, which allows me to zip together fragments of YouTube videos. Here's Mark Dowding singing a bit of Calico Prince of the magnificent Ellen Hinton. That's me again calling him magnificent. What's the use of repining? World Noble Watercresses, Martin Carthy and Dave Swarbrick on terrible recording of Going List for a Sailor, The Wolf's Tones and Planksty, all singing songs or fragments of songs by Harry Clifton.
She was very fond of dancing, but allow me to remark that one fine day she danced away with the calico printer's mark.
This world is a difficult riddle, there's so many people you see, with faces as long as a fiddle, which ought to be smiling with glee. You know in this world there is plenty, enough of good things for us all, and yet there's not 1 out of 20 but thinks that his share is too small. But if you will give attention, I will tell without delay how a buxom little damsel my attention led astray, and promised for to marry me upon the 1st of May, and she left me with a bunch of watercresses.
Time of troubles I've seen a few. I found a far better in every time to paddle me own canoe. Me wants a smaller carrot and doll, me that's the caveman shoe. I drive away straight from the ocean of life and paddle me own canoe. And I have no wife to follow me life, all over the crew and crew. The whole day long I laugh at the song to paddle me own canoe.
Once I was a waiting man that lived at home at Thames. Now I am a mariner that ploughs the angry seas. Oh, I always loved seafaring life, I bid me love the Jew. I shipped a steward and cook me boys on board the Kangaroo. Oh, we never thought she would prove false or lead the proven through, as we sailed away through Milford Bay on board the Kangaroo.
Oh, I love that. So Harry Lauder, then the other Harry, he was very much the other end of the end of the music halls. He too was a son of the working class, a son of a potter. At 14 years old, he started working in the mines. He worked in the mines for 10 years whilst he was appearing part-time as a performer. He was very much a superstar of the period. He emerged from the halls, enjoying global success in Canada, America, Australia, New Zealand, well known throughout the world. He again was credited with writing all his own songs. When most of the big stars did not, they bought them from songwriters, and songwriting was an established commercial enterprise, bureaucratic enterprise by that time. But he didn't do that. He bought all his own songs. He wrote all his own songs, or did he? He may have actually not been entirely telling the truth all the time, but it's very difficult to unpick it unless you can find direct evidence. We leave them credited to Harry Lauder. He operated at the respectable end of the music hall market. He sold millions of copies of sheet music, but also of recordings because of the people he was working at. And he was particularly active in playing for servicemen in World War I, and his songs were widely sung by servicemen on active duty in concerts and so on, and that may be a key part in why some of his songs have survived. So I've got a full list of his songs that went into traditional singing there, but I'm not going to talk about that. Some of the key songs you may know: The Wedding, Blocky McGraw, Killy Cranky, which, as we see in a minute, becomes another song you might know, Hey Donal, which is the song I'm going to talk about in some depth. It's Nice to Get Up in the Morning, We Parted on the Shore, which became a sea shanty called Up She Goes, Just a Wee Doc and Doris, I Think I'll Get Away in the Summertime, Roman in the Gloaming, and one everybody knows, Stop Your Tickling Job. But I've got some songs for you to listen to, a minute or so. The chorus singing The Wedding of Blocky McGraw, which I can't give a date for, I'm calling them magnificent. I love the Leverkusen Shanty Choir because I do like their version of Up She Goes. It makes me laugh every time I hear it. Ewan MacColl singing Join the British Army, which, unknowns to him, was based on a Harry Lauder song. Agnes and Nellie McQuillan, who were collected, who are I my head, but it's part of the Coltas Irish archive of traditional music, and they were collected singing a Harry Lauder song in 1978. So I'll play these for you.
Oh, you should have been there, it was braw at the wedding of Lucky McGraw. The first thing to sing was your Mrs. O'Russell, but she couldn't sing, and she started to whistle, and somebody gave her a kick in the bustle, and into the wedding of Lucky McGraw.
And he kissed her on the face, and the crew began to roll. Oh, up she goes, we're all for Baltimore. And he kissed her on the face, and the crew began to roll. Oh, up she goes, we're bound for Baltimore. No more, we go to sea no more. As soon we reach the town tonight, we're leaving for the shore.
When I was young, I used to be as fine a man as ever you'd see. The Prince of Wales, he said to me, come and join the British Army. Toodle-oodle-oodle, they're looking for monkeys up in the zoo, and if I had a face like you, I'd join the British Army.
Some time ago I had a cold in the head, and the doctor advised me to go to my bed. Went to the coast for a couple of weeks. The weather was fine, and it covered me cheek. I went for the sail every day I was there. I didn't care whether rain or fair. The last thing I had was...
That ends rather suddenly. Okay, so who let all this stuff in to the writing decks? Who let it all into the traditional repertoire? Who were these idiots? Well, you'll see the key collectors of Clifton songs, which are lifted at the top, and key collectors of Lauder songs, it should say, at the bottom. People like Hamish Henderson, Gavin Gregg, Alfred Williams, all these people collected songs by either Clifton or Lauder. And even the great Cecil Sharp, it was the wrong period really to collect Lauder songs, although I might come back to that. But he collected songs that were associated with Harry Clifton, that were written by Harry Clifton. So, when he was collecting from the workhouse at Marylebone, and he also collected the tune of I'll Go and Enlist as a Sailor as a Morris jig. So he didn't always recognise musical songs when he came across them. I'm not going to talk about this slide at all, but you can then analyse where songs were collected as a whole, so where the corpus of Harry Clifton and Harry Lauder songs were collected, but that'll have to wait for another day. But I wanted to tell some song stories, telling you the stories of songs, telling the stories of the artefacts of individual performers and writers and composers, I think tells us a lot about what people were listening to, and more importantly, perhaps what people were singing over the last 150 years. And I want to talk about this amazingly popular song, which I guess not many of you may have heard in the past, called Pulling Hard Against the Stream. It was published first in the UK in January 1867, and in America about a year later. Not to jump ahead of myself, I need to say what a motto song is. Let me find the right page. Pulling Hard Against the Stream became the ultimate example of what is known as a motto song. These were songs that give advice to people about how to live their lives, essentially. So it might promote the benefits of being free and easy. You may know that chorus from an old musical song. It may suggest that you should never push a man when it's going downhill, that you should always help a lame dog over the stile. You get the idea. They can sound terribly trite, but actually they were very powerful in their time. And comic performers often ended their performance by singing a serious song, much as people still do today. And Mike Yarwood, who recently died, always used to say at the end of the show, "And this is me," and he'd sing something soppy. So it's very much a tradition that still exists in stage performance today. So, pulling hard against the stream, do your best for one. Do your best. I can't sing it now. Do your best for one another. Make this life a pleasant dream. Help a weary, worn-out traveller, as many of us sing. Pulling hard against the stream. So it's a song that wasn't the first motto sung, but it was probably the most successful. How do we measure success? We can see in print, and a lot of this comes from the Ride indexes, that it survived in broadside. 20 different broadside instances that are listed in Ride. That's not that impressive, to be honest. But the fact that it was published in 36 songbooks between 1860 and 1910, 30 of which are from the USA, is a bit more impressive. But the record of people singing this song is absolutely astounding. Within a month of it being published, it was being sung in a penny reading in Tenterden in Kent. People were clearly waiting for the next Harry Clifton song and wanted to be the first person to sing it. And there are around 500 instances, records in local newspapers, of people singing this song between 1862 and 1910. And these only, you imagine what was published in local newspapers was only a fraction of the singing that was going on in trade union suppers, in political meetings, in penny readings, and so on. These songs were being sung, and particularly Pulling Hard Against the Stream. And it was regularly performed until the First World War. And what will we say? Yeah, the Daughters of the Utah Pioneers may well still be singing it today. Records going up to about 2010 show that they started their meetings with a Pledge of Allegiance to the flag and the singing of Pulling Hard Against the Stream. So it was an incredibly successful song. So everybody was singing it in the late 19th century and early 20th century. It hit a chord. And I should say its message of helping a brother fits both with a liberal Christian morality and, interestingly, with the ideology of trade unions and friendly societies. So it was sung at the founding of an agricultural trade union in Kibworth, Leicestershire. It was sung at a suppy to raise money for a mining union. It was sung by friendly societies. All sorts of different groups would see it as being their song. Okay. So looking particularly at who let Pulling Hard into the repertoire, in terms of how it was collected in the first half of the 20th century, it wasn't. This particular song was collected. The evidence we have that people still knew it was memories of people collected in local newspapers. The West Sussex Gazette, the Taunton Courier asked people to say, what songs do you remember, what old songs do you remember? And so in the first third, in fact, of the 20th century, that was the main way that we have evidence that it was still circulating. But when the post-war collectors started in the 1950s, it started getting collected all over the place, in Canada, in America, in England, all sorts. There'll be familiar names on that list. I just need to double check I'm not forgetting anything. All right, so that's his most successful motto song. But Paddle Your Own Canoe, as you heard earlier, was also a motto song. It's not sung like that today. But the idea that you paddle your own canoe, you are independent, is again advice on how to live your life.
In this world I gain my knowledge, and for it I've had to pay. Though I haven't been to college, yet I've heard a poet say, life is like a mighty river, flowing on from day to day. Men are vessels launched upon it, sometimes wrecked and cast away.
That was Willie Williamson, collected by Peter Cook in 1971 in Walsay in the Shetlands. So a nice version. Am I saying that wrong? I forgive my Scottish pronunciation is going to get worse as we go on. Clifton's motto songs weren't the only songs that had impact. I mentioned some of his comic songs. I wanted to say, and his Irish songs had a big impact as well. But I wanted to say something which I've really come across since doing this piece of research, is that his songs were remembered more or less unaltered and whole, whereas Harry Clifton's were very often remembered in a fragmentary way. I'm going to say some initial thoughts about why that might be later. But let's talk about a song by Harry Lauder, Hey Donald, or Hey Donald. Let's be careful here. The Hey Donald, Ho Donald chorus is pretty ubiquitous in a number of different folk songs. But this particular Hey Donald was first published in 1902, first advertised in 1902, so he was singing it for a little while before it was published as sheet music. It was immediately popular. Again, in the 11-year period before the First World War, there were 100 newspaper reports of amateur performances. So lots of people were singing this latest hit in that period leading up to the First World War. The publishers had a much tighter hold on how songs were printed in the period before the First World War. It was the period of can't go into that. The piracy wars, but we won't go into that at the moment. But so it's not surprising that it was the music publishers that would license printing of it, and printing of the song was much more limited than it was in the late 19th century. And Lauder recorded Hey Donald in 1908, and it's interesting that he took his chorus from Robert Tannehill's song that was written about 1805, between 1800 and 1810. Robert Tannehill wrote a song or a poem with the stanza, Hey Donald, ho Donald, think upon your vow, Donald, mind the Henry no Donald, where ye vowed to loo me. I do apologise, I am a quarter Scottish, but it doesn't affect my pronunciation, as you can tell. When Lauder published his Hey Donald as sheet music, his chorus as published was Hey Donald, ho Donald, think upon your vow, Donald. Donald, you are big and broad, kiss me quick and gang a war. But when he recorded it in 1908, it was Hey Donald, ho Donald, think upon your vow, Donald. In among the blooming heather where you vowed to loo me, which again is going back to the original Robert Tannehill. So he obviously in singing it had altered it. Okay, and there are other songs with the Hey Donald, ho Donald chorus, some written before Lauder's version, some after. But it's safe to say in the first half of the 20th century at least, if you said you were singing Hey Donald, you can be reasonably sure it was Lauder's version.
It was in the merry month of May that a bonny wee lass met one day, and all the language she could say was Donald, dinna miss me. Hug me, tug me as you please, watch and mind you dinna squeeze. When you think that nobody sees us, Donald, come and kiss me. Hi Donald, oh Donald, think upon your vow, Donald, in among the blooming heather where you vowed to loo me. Hi.
I've just come down from the Isle of Skye. I'm no very big and I'm awful shy, and the lassies shout when I go by, Donald, where's your trousers? Let the wind blow high, let the wind blow low, through the streets in my keep-tail go. All the lassies say hello, Donald, where's your trousers?
So that wasn't just there for my sense of mischief, although it was. A song sadly without a route number, which I think is one of Steve's greatest egregious errors. But Donald Wears Your Trousers, it seems to me, is pretty clearly derived from the Harry Lauder song. It takes its phrasing, the tune, and the Donald, and from Hey Donald, Ho Donald. But that's a tradition in Scotland in particular, where that borrowing of fragments seems to have been a big part of taking songs forward. Who collected this song? Well, Duncan and Greg, the great Scottish collectors from North East Scotland, James Duncan and Gavin Greg, collected it in 1906 and 1914. So within a few years of it being published, singers were singing it to collectors, and it was being incorporated into what we see as being the folk tradition. I don't know whether the people singing it were knowingly singing songs from the music halls to kid on Gavin Craig, and I don't know. But clearly, whilst they were renowned experts on folk music, they didn't recognise every inch and tot of the sort of popular music of the day, so it's perhaps not surprising they didn't recognise it. But I do think it's interesting that the song was being collected as a folk song within 3 years of it being first published. And again, you can see other people that it's been collected from there, including Willie Matheson, another singer who collaborated with Hamish Henderson, and as was mentioned this morning, he was another person that provided loads of songs. But I wanted to talk briefly about the Scottish Traveller community in the halls. They did loads of songs that were derived from the music hall. Sometimes it was obvious, and sometimes it wasn't. And again, I've got no idea, no disrespect intended, whether they were knowingly singing fragments of old music hall songs, or whether it just come to them as such. So the Braes of Killiecrankie was sung by Jeannie Robinson, basically constructed by putting together bits of two different Lauder songs. Back where they had the Groves, simply a Lauder song sung by Jeannie Robinson. Piper McFarlane was often collected as the Bonny Wee Lassie frae Garrock, which, but it is word for word, almost word for word, a Lauder song. Stop Your Jits, Tickling Jock, which is so famous, I'm absolutely certain everybody knew it was a music hall song when Jeannie sang it. And The Wedding of Sandy McNabb, again sung by Jeannie McNabb. But there are loads of others, not by Lauder, that the Scottish Traveller community included in their repertoire. The wonderful I Canna Commute the New, which I'd sing for you if I was brave enough. One that I can't say by Harry Lynn, but Daddy Wouldn't Buy Me a Bower. The Moon Shines Bright on Charlie Chaplin, and of course, A Man You Don't Meet Every Day, which is a music hall song reversioned by members of the Scottish Traveller community. Reversioned so much you could argue it's a different song, but that's I'm not going to enter that debate now. So putting things together and winding up, the Clifton songs have provided. Oh, I didn't talk about. Anyway, forget. Clifton songs have provided the starting point for key songs in the English language and Irish English language folk repertoire. Lauder songs have often survived in fragments. The sea shanty I talked about is derived not wholly from Lauder, but an important part of it, important fragments of it come from Lauder. And I wanted to say that until sort of 25 years or so ago, we relied on the expertise of folk song collectors and enthusiasts and folk singers. And quite often they made mistakes. There's no disrespect to them to say they didn't always recognise stage songs. And we can even admire, Ewan McCall was particularly good at spotting music hall usually, but didn't always get it. But now we have no excuse. We have many more resources. We're finding new songs all the time. One way to take that on board is to therefore eliminate all the music hall songs from, say, the Scots Traveller repertoire, and that has been done. People have tried to do that and unfortunately failed and left some in there. But at least said about that, the better. But if, like me, you think we should welcome these songs into our repertoire, even Harry Lauder and his shortbread tin Scottishness, which really irritates some people, it's part of what vernacular singing. It's part of what people were singing. We need to understand where the songs were. That means understanding how they were sung on stage, as well as how they were sung by ordinary people, to use the term. If we adopt that approach, I'm guessing there's a lot of work to do, but I guess most of us here in that room see that that's probably the way to go, rather than looking for music hall songs in order to excise them from our tradition. I hope that was useful. I'm sorry if my speech wasn't as clear as it should be. I was too lazy to put up a references page. Nearly all my references are on my sources page of the website. and ones that aren't there now will be there very soon.
Great, thank you so much, John. That was completely fascinating, and just made you realise just how much familiar stuff is you've now sort of filled in a background on. Thank you so much. We are a little bit up for time, but one question maybe, or two we can probably fit in. I think so. Yes, John?
So, you're saying that the Clifton songs survive intact and the Lauders don't, which is counterintuitive. Any ideas why that would be the case?
Yeah, good question, because I meant to answer it. I think it's probably because people learnt Lauder songs from recordings, and therefore almost orally. Clifton songs were so widely in print that lots of people would have interacted with the print versions, and anyone getting it orally would probably be interacting with someone that interacted with the print version, because there were literally thousands, there were hundreds, possibly as many as 1,000 different printed versions of Lauder songs in circulation. Lauder songs. Sorry, Clifton songs.
Yes, yes.
Both called Harry.
The two Harrys, yeah.
But that's just me speculating. I don't really know.
Any other questions or comments? No, stunned us all into silence. Thank you so much, John. That was fascinating. Remains, last but definitely not least, to welcome David Atkinson here, no stranger to the TSF or to Sheffield meetings. We're going to talk to you at some point, sort it out. So, where are we? Let's do this one. Lovely. So, I think sparked by a TSF online meeting, this paper might have its origins in that it's going to consider folk song self-realisation and the measure of authenticity. Thank you, David.
Yes, it gets the prize for the most pretentious title of the day. Apologies to one or two of you who may have heard a version of this before. My most devoted followers will realise I've made a few changes. Okay, whether we like it or not, the notion of authenticity has pervaded and continues to pervade both popular and scholarly thinking about folk song. But one might well ask, what does it mean to say that a song or a performance is authentic? Where does the source of authenticity lie? How is authenticity to be measured? The Oxford English Dictionary offers several different definitions for authenticity on the screen, and I'll talk about them briefly. Some of these meanings are indeed measurable. The fact or quality of being true or in accordance with fact, correct or incorrect. The fact or quality of being authoritative or duly authorised. Something either is or is not authorised according to certain predetermined criteria. Genuineness. The fact or quality of being real. An artwork is either what it purports to be, or it is something else, a copy or a forgery. The fact or quality of being real. The Thornton Heath poltergeist of 1938 was either a real phenomenon or just a psychological aberration. The other meanings, however, are essentially abstract and ascribed qualities which are not objectively measurable. The quality of truthful correspondence between inner feelings and their outward expression, the quality or fact of accurately reflecting a model or exemplar, or of being traditionally produced or presented, a mode of existence arising from self-awareness, the condition of being true to one's self. The philosopher Denis Dutton draws an important distinction between, on the one hand, nominal authenticity, which includes the first group of meanings, which are, at least in principle, empirical and measurable, and on the other hand, expressive authenticity, which covers the second group of meanings, which are not readily amenable to measurement, and which can be regarded as ascribed meanings. It is this second group that is most pertinent to the theory and practice of folk song, and to the philosophical tradition that relates authenticity to self-realisation. There is now a considerable scholarly literature concerned with authenticity in all sorts of fields, including some close to home, such as literature, popular music, world music, performing arts, folklore, heritage and tourism, and others seemingly more remote, such as politics, philosophy, consumer research and business ethics. Historically, the locus classicus is the noble savage of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who imagined authenticity located in a pre-societal state of humankind. From there, it was a relatively short step for the likes of Johann Gottfried Herder and the brothers Grimm to find authenticity in the cultural practices of the peasant populations of Europe in the second half of the 18th century, which could be construed as largely untainted by, quote, society as organised and experienced by elites. Hence, the discovery of the folk, and with specific reference to folk song, the voice of the people. It's difficult here to resist the irony of pointing out that one of the key documents that inspired the European folk song movement of the Romantic period, and the one most pertinent to folk song in the English language, was Thomas Percy's Relics of Ancient English Poetry, most of the pieces in which had little directly to do with the peasantry, even if such a group could be said to have existed in early modern England. Philip Bollman, in the study of folk music in the modern world, defined authenticity as, quote, the consistent representation of the origins of a piece, or a style, or a genre, in subsequent versions, or at later moments in the tradition's chronology. With regard to those aspects that are salient, the piece remains the piece. Change, development, even disintegration are all inevitable, but key to delimiting the genre is the delicate balance between authenticity and change, with the inauthentic as an ever-present threat defined by, quote, its otherness, its contrast with the aesthetic ideal of the past, and its witness to the challenge of the present. In its extreme form, the perceived absence of authenticity can be genre-changing, quote, when the presence of the inauthentic exhibits imbalance with the authentic, pieces cease to be folk music, crossing the border into popular music instead. At first blush, this sounds like a neat and historically based formulation, to which we might be tempted to give at least a guarded assent. There is, though, no getting away from the fact that phrases like consistent representation, aspects that are salient, the aesthetic ideal of the past, the challenge of the present, imbalance with the authentic, are all subjective ideas open to interpretation and challenge. The authenticity Bollman is describing is in fact an entirely abstract quality, one that is imposed, inferred, ascribed, attributed. Authenticity does not inhere in songs, or in singers, or in things like oral transmission, performance, or social context. Rather, the measure of authenticity belongs in the mind, that is, in the mind of the listener, the observer, whether contemporaneously or at a temporal remove. This is a view of the matter that accords more closely with philosophical than with folkloric perspectives on the question. According to Lionel Trilling in Sincerity and Authenticity, the concept of authenticity first emerged in the early modern period with the transformation from the medieval social order to a more individualised form of society which placed a greater emphasis on self-realisation. Authenticity as self-realisation is critical, for instance, to René Descartes' theory of knowledge, Rousseau's pessimistic depiction of the corrupting influence of society on the individual, and the subjective basis of Immanuel Kant's epistemology. Hegel, in the Phenomenology of Mind, writes of a condition of self-conscious living, which he equates with freedom. For Nietzsche, authenticity is to be found in the self-empowerment and the achievement of personal uniqueness. For Martin Heidegger, the individual's being in the world, what he calls Dasein, is constantly being compromised by the inauthentic, which roughly corresponds with everyday social life. Authenticity, Eigentlichkeit, can only be achieved through conscious self-realisation, in particular by acknowledging the inevitable fact of one's own mortality. And Jean-Paul Sartre, in Being and Nothingness, likewise locates inauthenticity in social life, to which the self is in a state of conscious submission, making authenticity as self-determination appear unattainable, although existential awareness at least clarifies the condition. Thus, as Charles Lindholm writes, the emphasis in Western philosophical and religious thought has consistently been on authenticity as expressive correspondence, on being what one is. The corollary of the philosophical tradition of authenticity as expressive correspondence, however, is a distancing from the idea of collective authenticity. Collective authenticity, directed away from the self and towards shared origins, histories and traditions, has largely been the concern of anthropologists, sociologists and folklorists, who have identified it as a cultural construct that developed in opposition to things like the rise of individualism and late capitalism. Much writing about music revivals takes authenticity to be a defining quality, inherent in products, persons and processes. Tamara Livingston's influential general model of music revivals identifies the pursuit of authenticity, defined as continuity with and accurate reproduction of historical products and practices, as the central characteristic that distinguishes music revivals from other musical movements. Vic Gammon notes how ideas of collective authenticity located in songs and singers have persisted as a defining trope of the folk song revival. I won't bother to read that out, but it's on the screen. The ideology of revival as a locus of opposition to the cultural mainstream coalesces around authenticity, and when authenticity ceases to be an end in itself, new styles emerge and the revival becomes absorbed into the mainstream. So, revival ideologies, whatever precise form they take, continue to uphold Bowman's definition, which locates authenticity in products, songs, processes, performances, and, we might add, people. Claims to authenticity have also been a regular feature of both journalistic and scholarly writing about popular music, with plenty of evidence of the same tendency to confuse what is an ascribed quality with something that is supposedly inherent in songs and performances. Alan Moore tackles this situation head-on in an important article that understands authenticity as something ascribed, not inscribed, and specifically as, quote, a construction made on the act of listening. Moore then breaks down this observation into three different strands of perceived authenticity. Firstly, authenticity of expression, that is, when a performer is perceived as entering into unmediated communication with the audience. This can be inferred from things such as the adoption of a non-commercial musical style, choice of repertoire, which could be folk song or early music or trad jazz, vintage instrumentation and the eschewing of undue reliance on technology, and the avoidance of other aspects of overt commercialism. The use of autotune, for example, would certainly rule out the perception of authenticity of expression. Secondly, authenticity of execution. That is the accurate representation of a performance tradition. Here, the performer is perceived to retain a close connection with the point of origin, inferred, of course, in the folk world, but also in other genres such as early music, blues, jazz, early rock and roll, and non-Western musical styles. Another example lies in the attention to faithful reproduction shown by tribute bands, which Moore compares with historically informed performances of medieval, Renaissance and Baroque music using period instruments. And thirdly, authenticity of experience. That is, validation of the audience's experience of life. This is inferred when musical experiences are perceived to validate the listener's own life experience. The readiest exemplification lies in the early and long-standing distinction between rock, authentic, and pop, inauthentic, which arose when young people began to feel themselves alienated from music controlled by big record corporations, and instead to find a reflection of their own lives in the personae and the songs of the early rock and rollers. There's plenty of scope for ironic reflection here, but audiences have continued to identify with, say, so-called Celtic music. It is this third strand, authenticity of experience, that I think is the most interesting, not least because of the challenge it poses by locating authenticity within the listener's own experience, to the orthodoxy that connects folk song authenticity with songs, singers and contexts. As Moore writes, the music we declare to be authentic is the music we appropriate. Nevertheless, in what I suppose we might call real life, the implied binary division between authenticity and inauthenticity persists, not least because there are some things, some kinds of songs for instance, that we want to appropriate for ourselves and others that we do not. The folklorist too might want to reject the binary division, but at the same time might want to use it as an analytical tool to illuminate the creative, inventive processes that are going on and subtly altering the heritage of the past. The anthropologist Dimitrios Theodosopoulos turns this tendency conceptually to distrust the binary, but at the same time to use it analytically in order to study products and processes, the trap of authenticity. Matthew Gelbart, in The Invention of Folk Music and Arts Music, I've forgotten what the next slide is. Doesn't seem to be anything. No. All right. Matthew Gelbart, in The Invention of Folk Music and Art Music, argues against abandoning formative ideas of authenticity and tradition rooted in the origins and idiom of a piece, if only because they have been around for a long time and inform the practice, or at least the self-image, of modern performers who see themselves as folk musicians. Furthermore, the argument about authenticity persists in much broader discussions about musical experiences and particularly about songs. Jeanette Bicknell, in her book Philosophy of Song and Singing, writes about authenticity as faithfulness and authenticity as sincerity, which roughly correspond to Moore's authenticity of execution and authenticity of expression. Her perspective throughout is oriented towards performers more than audiences, but she does address listener perspectives when she turns to what she calls authenticity as boundary policing. This refers to the ways in which listeners judge musical experiences in terms of their conformity, or not, to preconceived idioms or styles. For Bicknell, this kind of authenticity is fundamentally socially constructed, and it allows listeners to connect with a particular group identity, hence boundary policing. Marcello Sorche-Keller too has written in some detail about the role of music in the formation of group identity, and ominously about music's appeal for totalitarian regimes. He attributes the power of music in this regard to the abstract and non-semantic nature of sound structures, to which feelings, ideas and symbols, both individual and shared, can readily attach themselves. Anyone at all familiar with the endless proliferation of subgenres in contemporary rock music will recognise the same phenomenon of boundary formation and partisan commitment to particular musical styles. And I'm wearing my Svalbard t-shirt today to identify with the post-black metal band whose oeuvre you're probably all very familiar with. So, if we acknowledge with scholars like Moore that authenticity does not inhere in products, persons or processes, the challenge for the postmodern folk song enthusiast is to answer the question, why do I ascribe authenticity to such and such a song performed by such and such a singer in such and such a way? Or to put it another way, in what way can searching for lambs validate my experience of life? It might well be sung without accompaniment or affectation, treated as a love story rather than, say, the relation of an opportune encounter for a young man in the wool trade or a particularly devious butcher, but the sincerity is still an act. The folk singer takes on and inhabits a dramatic persona, just as does the classically trained singer who accompanies the Vaughan Williams arrangement of the same song. It is an act to which the listener can choose to ascribe or deny values of sincerity and authenticity. This is where Bicknell ends up when she poses the question, is it all subjective? Which she answers after a fashion by allowing that one version of authenticity is as a kind of shorthand for personal taste and strong conviction. That is to say, authenticity is to be found in the aesthetics of folk song, or of a particular folk song, or any other kind of song, as perceived by the listener who cares sufficiently about it. We can speak of the beauty of folk tunes, and the musicologist can explain some of their particular qualities. The words of folk songs frequently have more of imaginative narrative content than is the case with, say, modern popular songs, and they can shed light on life experiences in the past, albeit often in a rather oblique manner. Dennis Dutton makes the important point that history and provenance are intrinsic components of contemporary aesthetics. Works of art of all kinds embody and express cultural history, as well as providing the focus for more subjective feelings. In this light, a source of expressive correspondence can be found in the pleasure of the historical imagination and emotional engagement with the content of folk songs. It might be quite difficult to argue that folk songs really represent a validation of personal experience if that is conceived as engagement with the world as it ought to be. But engagement with the world as it was, with the cultural lives of working men and women in the past, viewed through the prism of song, could be perceived as enhancing the contemporary listener's own historically situated life experience. At the very least, folk songs can be perceived as offering a transcendence of the everyday and a respite from the atomisation of postmodernity. This backward-looking cultural historical perspective resonates too with the belief that folk song was historically a kind of music making that was largely informal, non-commercial and non-professional, and that a do-it-yourself arts and crafts sort of ethos persists down to the present day in the folk song world. That is a line of thinking that tends to revert towards the left-leaning ideology that inspired much of the earlier post-war revival, and folk song can easily become nostalgic and romanticised, which is perhaps what happened in the writings of A.L. Lloyd. Still, for rock music, Weisser-Townert and Lindbergh describe what they call authenticity as negation, an idea about music that stands against the commercialisation, standardisation and blandness that characterise the mainstream music industry. So it might be possible to identify a similar kind of authenticity by negation when folk song is perceived to resist not just the mainstream music industry, but the gloss that comes with contemporary manifestations of the so-called folk arts. The latter a development that seems to epitomise the assimilation of revival into mainstream as predicted by Tamara Livingston. It is difficult not to concede, however, that for some people the enjoyment of folk songs probably amounts to little more than personal preference, art for art's sake. It does seem to be the case, moreover, that preferences such as taste in music are important components of individual self-identity, self-realisation. It is not at all evident, though, that such preferences are necessarily dependent upon any sort of measurable criterion of authenticity. All the same, in the history of folk song, as of other genres, there is little doubt that authenticity has been and still is a recurrent trope. But as the philosophical tradition has it, authenticity does not inhere in the easy places where we might want to look for it, in a canon of songs, or in origins, or genres, or styles, or in singers, or contexts of performance, or modes of transmission. Rather, it is a quality ascribed consciously or unconsciously, for whatever reason, by the engaged listener.
Thank you so much, David. Lovely, that incredibly thorough, and yes, there's a lot to process in that talk, but do we have any questions or feedback for David on his? Paul?
I just wonder whether there's anything in the question of where we think the authenticity resides in folk music, because I think there's an awful lot of emphasis on the words, authentic versions of the words, and of course that's kind of quite controversial at the moment, where people are editing new versions of songs for so-called political correctness or whatever, and there seems to be quite an attachment to the words, and I wonder how that is different to attachment to the melody or attachment to performers, because in popular music quite often the attachment is to the performer. You know, I'm thinking of the kind of almost extreme fan identifications with people like Taylor Swift and Lana Del Rey, for example. Whereas some folk fans might think, okay, well, my identification is with Martin Carthy because he's like the epitome of authenticity or whatever. But it does seem to me that the authenticity debate in folk music is quite often centred on the words rather than other things.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair point, though in relation to the melodies it would focus on arrangements probably rather than melody per se. Do you think? You know.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it, yeah.
Think about it.
Yes.
Yeah. But yes, that's a good point, Paul. I didn't have you down as a Swiftie, but there you go.
Would be a certain amount of performance, performances being judged as authentic or not. I particularly I think I'd have a lot of experience of that. And people singing with an awful lot of ornamentation sometimes, or particular types of, putting their own interpretation of the song sometimes is resisted by traditional singers. They want to hear the song very plain.
Yeah, yes indeed.
Did you hear that at the back? Sorry, you might need to repeat that. Did you hear that at the back? No.
Oh, this is about the way in which essentially singers' performances, ornamentation and things like that, and how they contribute to or detract from the idea of authenticity. I suppose that's a kind of conformity to a preconceived way in which you want to hear the song.
I mean, I'm always struck by this idea that the first way you hear it becomes your yardstick for everything else, of course. So it becomes your authentic version. It's the one you heard in your youth, or it's the one that you didn't. So it's sort of a completely subjective, random kind of thing, and you just sort of, everything else then becomes the measure against that, even though you might intellectually reject it as the most authentic, but somehow it lodges in there, I don't know.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry, and Faye, and then John.
So I'm wondering if there's something specific about traditional music or folk music, rather than other genres, because you talked interestingly across the genres there, and the difference between how people sing and the academic interpretations, like sort of how people treat authenticity within their singing practice, or how academics talk about it. Because there seems to be a lot still of weight given to the truth of the origin of the song. So I could learn a song, sing it, feel brilliant, and then if I learn, like time and talk together, that it's come to the music hall 2 years ago, that's going to change my perception of it, and what I felt was a beautiful, authentic performance or relationship I had with the song could just be ruined like that with a bit of information, because I've put too much weight on, or I have put weight on that bit of authenticity. So are there differences between how authenticity is treated in an academic way, like you've done here, or by performers specifically in traditional music? Is that a thing? Is that interesting?
I'm guessing that it probably is a thing, and I'm thinking in relation to popular music, there's quite a I mean, I'm not really an expert, but from what I've read, there seems to be quite a division between popular and journalistic understandings of authenticity and the more analytical stuff that I've quoted, particularly from Alan Moore, who tries to get to what actually underlies ideas of authenticity. It's a bit more difficult to talk about it in terms of modern popular music because you don't have that going back to the origins that we have in folk music. But that's there in, say, early music and probably in other genres like trad jazz and so forth that I know nothing about.
John, I think you had a point too.
Yeah, it's just about the question of authenticity being assigned to a song or to a particular performer. But isn't there something as well about community, about where and how songs are produced? To me, something that gives authenticity, if you like, to folk music is the fact that it is still sung by, again, inverted commas, ordinary people in social situations, and it's that lends it an authenticity to the community holding on to the song. And my favourite version of a song maybe one that I heard someone sing around that no one else in the room knows particularly, because they don't know particular individual. I'm not sure I'm making much sense, but I sort of think there is some element of authenticity and
yeah, no, I think that's a good point, that the sort of social context for it is an important locus in which people perceive authenticity, be it in a folk club or whatever, and that's what I was briefly touching on in what I said about the sort of arts and crafts kind of practice, the ideology of the early post-war revival, and what I've been rather glossed over in the sort of comparative stuff in relation to subgenres of modern popular music, where if you look up metal or death metal or something on Wikipedia, there's pages and pages of detailed subgenres of which bands fall into which categories, and people do care about that. Take my word for it. You might not.
I try not to look up too many heavy metal bands, death metal bands, sort of thing, but yeah.
So yeah.
Any further points?
Sort of a question, because one of the most common ways that I think performers try to sort of pin a badge of authenticity to themselves is sort of generational authenticity, as in my grandfather was Irish, therefore me singing this Irish song is authentic. And it's just quite interesting because it's also quite problematic, isn't it? Because it then implies that you have to have a sort of genetic justification. You know, I just wondered how that fits into your conception.
Well, I mean, again, you make the point that it's something that the person sort of ascribes that kind of importance to, whereas in fact it's an abstract quality, really. The chance that you may not sound anything like your grandfather or grandmother, whatever. Those have all been very pertinent questions, and I think sort of reinforce my starting point, if nothing else, that it remains a sort of elephant in the room in the folk song world, an authentic elephant.
Thank you so much, David, for giving us the most authentic paper. Brilliant. I think that brings us to the end, unless there's someone I've forgotten. Are there any sort of post-conference announcements? What anticipations of what comes next? Anything I should be saying? Handing the floor over to... Have we got a TSF meeting coming up where we should be online? Sorry to bring this on you. I thought you had it all in your mind, those newsletters and things that you so well send out. just as you're collecting your wits, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Faye and Kath in her absence for all your organisation of this event here and the lovely biscuits and sorting the room, the tech and all those things that make a conference run well. And also and of course to the TSF and all the work behind the scenes by Martin. Also Steve, who's contributed to this event and obviously prevented by the train strike of being here. And yes, as you said, there will be the possibility to catch up on these talks. We hope it's all worked, you know, online in due course.
We'll figure it out.
So we will. We do. Well, you always do. Yeah.
And of course, thank you to Julia for managing the proceedings today.